So what would happen if Wizards of the Coast completely shut down? Would people still play Magic? Would prices drop? What formats would everybody play? Would somebody else print the cards? These are the questions I'm going to answer, or at least try to answer right now for you guys. So welcome back, everybody. This is Edwin, the Magic Engineer, and sorry I haven't been making videos lately, but it's for good reason. I've been playing games, hanging with family, good stuff. It's been a great time. I've met and hung out with a lot of you guys online. Also, quick good news before I get into it. I finally got my internet speed up again, so I can finally start doing live streams. In fact, I might even do one today, so I'm real excited about that. It's been like 5 months of just beating on Spectrum Internet, trying to get them to get it going. So real glad to finally have good internet upload speed so I can actually send video out at full speed. So anyways, so what if Wizards of the Coast was going to completely shut down? Would people still play Magic? Let's tackle that question first. Now, that's something people used to debate for a long time, and there wasn't a lot of like hard evidence like one way or another. But in like the last like 10 to 15 years, there has been other player-made formats that have come up, and they're now very major. Some of them are even much larger than the official formats that Wizards of the Coast tries to put on, except for like at large events that Wizards hosts, you know, but then just the sheer number of people doing it is so large that Wizards of the Coast started to actually officially recognize it and build formats around that. Now, of course, the first one I'm talking about that comes to mind is like EDH Commander kind of format. Now, that was totally player ran, right? And people were building these 100-card fun decks and starting to organize their own rules and stuff like that. And eventually, Wizards of the Coast, they couldn't directly come in and take EDH, so they formed, you know, Commander, you know, made their own kind of like rule set, but mostly based on it. And then they started selling product into it. Now there's even competitions and stuff like that. And there's another format that I focus on mostly in my channel and like what I play most of the time called Old School, which is really just these early sets that were printed at Magic's very beginning in very small print runs from 1993 to 1994. And then some reprints are allowed later on. Most of my videos and content is about that format. But the important part is that it was people, it was just the players that started picking that up again. And they looked at it and said, how can we revise this to fix the things that were the long problems of the formats a long time ago, but make it playable again and make it fun. And so they took a shot at it, and that's refined over the years. And now there's different sections of Old School, but it's a player-made format, and it's very strong. And like it even happens at tournaments. They have actual, like at GP Vegas and at all the Grand Prix and Magic Fest, they even have like side events and sometimes even semi-official events of Old School that actually run there. But that's a hard format to break into because it's got like such old, expensive cards. So there's two examples. Now, a third example would be Cube Draft. Now, as you guys know, Wizards of the Coast for years has been pushing like, you know, these sealed deck limited type formats, and Cube Draft is just effectively that. You just basically don't pay for packs. Somebody puts together, in fact, I've got mine over here. Let me go grab it. Should have thought of that before I started filming. Here's my cube. I know it actually literally like looks like a cube, right? And I've had people that have played here at my house actually sign it and stuff like that too. But anyways, a Cube Draft, you basically just put together a whole pile of cards depending on how many people you want to play. Usually you shoot for like 4 to 8, somewhere in that range. And you just get a good mix of like cards that you enjoy that work well with each other. You shuffle them all up together, make stacks of 15 as if they're booster packs, and then you all sit around a table and you all play. Now it's players that started doing Cube Drafts, and so people have new format Cube Drafts. People have done vintage Cube Drafts. Mine is an Old School Cube Draft, so it's like all old school cards. And you know, this could honestly happen for like any set under the sun. And so the big point is, if you're asking the question, would people still play Magic? I think there's an absolute hard answer to that one, and it's yes. And that's so proven through these player-made formats that have no involvement with WoTC whatsoever. In fact, those ones might even grow quite a bit if the main ones that are sucking people's attention away collapsed. Maybe more people would actually move into these formats, and they would actually start to grow. And maybe even just like kind of like be remade, but with like newer cards, newer sets kind of thing. So the next question that I posed is, would prices drop? Now, this one is very speculative, right? It's hard to put actual numbers on it, but I'll give you my take. Fear and greed is a powerful thing, and it can move much faster than actual reality when it comes to markets sometimes. Now, if Wizards of the Coast was going to shut their door, I would absolutely be expecting a lot of people to be worried about that, and that fear to drive a lot of people putting their cards into the market. And if you just have a large supply and demand that doesn't come up to match it, prices drop. So I think if Wizards shut their doors, I think there would initially be a large sell-off of cards. And that might change from one format to another, because maybe people will say, well, they might look at old things like, baseball cards and comic books, and they might say, well, only the oldest ones have any value. So they might sell everything new and put all that money into like old stuff. So maybe old stuff would spike a little bit initially, but that's very speculative. And like, it's very hard to know that. For the most part, I would just make the assumption that everything's going to go down, right? But after some amount of time, it's for the exact same reasons that sometimes people will say nobody ever really leaves Magic, because it's such a good game and you can't get that experience like anywhere else. And so when you go off and you stop playing Magic the Gathering, if you've played it for a while, and then you go off and you do other things, eventually you start pining for and missing that experience that you got with Magic that you just didn't get in other areas. And if you have all these cards sitting there in your closet and you can just pull them out, get some friends together and play, well, it seems to make a lot of sense that a lot of people after some amount of time are going to start to revisit it. And if prices are very low and you have a desire to play and you look at it and think, well, oh my gosh, Helm of Obedience is 50 cents. Thawing Glaciers is 50 cents. Maybe Lion's Eye Diamond was $200 at one point and now it's like $3 or something like that. The point is, if prices had dropped and you're wanting to play and you can now go scoop up all these old cards and play with your friends in some kind of cube draft kind of format, and it costs you nothing, well, people will do it. So I think initially there will be a price drop, and then the excitement will build and then people will start forming these little pockets of these formats, and I can't predict which pockets they'll form. That might depend on what were people's overall favorite card sets. Like some of the lamest card sets, maybe people will look at and be like, this sucked when it came out. I'm not going to play this again 10 years after the fact. When it sucked then, it sucked now, when I can go play anything I want. So maybe there'll be a bunch of people playing like an Urza's block, or maybe there'll be a bunch of people playing like a Mirrodin block or something like that, or a Ravnica block, because they really liked those interactions. And so I suspect pockets will start to pick up. It'll be player organized, and then people will start to go seek out those cards. And that's when prices will start to lift back up. And then it's just a thing of supply versus demand, because there's a lot of supply out there. How many people come back to start playing these formats? That will be the question, right? And it's hard to say how high prices will come back to, right? So, and that I was kind of leading into my next question there when I asked, what formats will everybody play? Well, I basically just said it because, I'm looking at my checklist here, making sure I get through everything. So I personally think people will initially at least want to revisit formats that they enjoyed themselves the most in. It's like if you ever go back and play like some old video game that you played when you were younger, then you play it again. And even if the game isn't as good as you remember it, you still get all those nostalgic feelings and you kind of remember the experience and stuff like that. I do think people will crave that. So I do think there'll be a bit of kind of block format where people will say like, just one specific block of cards, maybe with that standard edition mixed in, and then they'll organize online tournaments and play with people. So I do think that will be a thing, but then eventually maybe it'll shift over more towards more cube and more EDH kind of formats. So the last question that I pondered is, would someone else print cards? And that's a tough one, because a big thing blocking people from printing cards is the fact that Wizards of the Coast, they have had patents on the cards, and they're a large company with a lot of money, and they've got lawyers, and they have the ability and will to go sue somebody that violates patents and start stealing their intellectual property. But this is something that I learned quite extensively when I worked at Intel, is that a patent A patent really doesn't mean, like, if I get a patent on something and somebody violates it, the FBI is not going to be like scanning the internet on their own and then come break someone's door down and be like, hey, you violated Edwin's patent. It doesn't work like that. If you have a patent, you effectively have just created a right to go sue somebody, and it's kind of on you to defend your own patent. So Wizards of the Coast has all these patents on collectible card games and Magic cards, and they have rights to the artwork and stuff like that. If Wizards was ever to close their doors and nobody was defending that intellectual property, then it's possible somebody else could suddenly step up and start printing. And then it would come down to a money thing, right? Because somebody will still, technically speaking, have the rights to Wizards of the Coast. It won't just disappear. Somebody would have the rights. So let's say some other toy company, Bandai or something, comes in and starts like printing cards because it was owned by Hasbro, but now some other toy company or Mattel is doing it, right? Well, if they started doing it to such a degree where they made an awful lot of money, and so the result of the lawsuit could be grabbing a chunk of the money that was made by that company that was violating that intellectual property, then a lawsuit would probably happen. But if it was just a couple people on the side here and there making cards and selling them, they might get a cease and desist letter from the person who actually owns the intellectual property for the cards and the art and all that. But likely there wouldn't be any legal action unless like there was actual money behind it to be made in doing that actual lawsuit. So it kind of depends on a few different factors. Like, would someone else print cards? I think there's a good chance that small numbers of people would print cards, you know, for small numbers of sales, and it just wouldn't be worth the time to go chase them down. Excuse me, kind of like all the people over in China printing cards today. I mean, of course, Wizards doesn't want that to happen, but China doesn't respect intellectual property. They don't respect patent law, and it's very difficult, or just maybe even just impossible, to go chase down someone in China to protect your intellectual property. So it just doesn't really happen, right? So those would probably happen, but I doubt any large retailer would step in and start actually printing it. There could be a point where, like, if Wizards shuts their doors and maybe the players start like organizing amongst themselves, then maybe that would end up actually creating such a demand that maybe Hasbro would inject some new fresh cash into it, get Wizards of the Coast back going again, and maybe start something going, right? Maybe with a new business model or a different proposal or something like that. So that actually leads me to my next topic, which is going to be, if I could give any advice to Wizards of the Coast, what would it actually be? But that's actually going to be in my next video, so just stay tuned to the channel, guys. Maybe subscribe if you haven't subscribed before, and hopefully I'll see you back there real soon. Bye.